Hello and welcome to the Elevated Soul podcast. My name is Sam Burnett. I'm your host, and this is a podcast that I have been wanting to do for a long time. And I've kept myself from doing so for many reasons, mostly just unrealistic beliefs that I need to be an expert on something, or even thinking, oh, there's thousands of podcasts out there, so who would watch mine? But ultimately, it came down to just the feeling and messages that I was getting from healing sessions, from prayer, that just it was time to share my voice. And so here we are. So if you're tuning in, thank you for being here. My intention with this podcast is to share some stories, share about my healing journey, share about visions I have for the future, things that I'm looking to create and co-collaborate with other people on, as well as a strong number of videos on interviewing healers and people that have been instrumental along my path, just to kind of bring some exposure to ways of alternative healing that aren't necessarily in the mainstream. And through my journey, I've found that a lot of them, I kind of had preconceived notions about what this is, what Reiki is, what energy work is. And oftentimes those, I already know what this is, I don't believe it, or whatever, it just kind of gets in the way from trying new things, hence this podcast. So that is my intention for this show. And I figured I'd start just by introducing myself, my background, just a brief little timeline of my healing journey, so you can kind of connect to me and my energy and what I've been through and what brought me here. Okay, so like all healing journeys, progress is not linear, not just straight up. I've had many moments of little bits of awakening to something greater, and then the pendulum will swing, and then it'll come back, and then it'll swing. Each time I find the oscillations have gotten a little less wide, if that makes sense, and kind of broken away from this all or nothing mentality around spirituality, around healing, around just doing anything in life in general. So I'm sitting here in Ogden, Utah right now. I've been here about 14 years. I moved here from Northern California, where I was born and raised, and I came here to go to Weber State University 14 years ago, so the fall of 2012, so just about 14 years. My connection to Utah was through a friend that I grew up with. My mom did daycare for him and his sister, and both of his parents are from here, so they have family here. And his dad got terminally ill. I want to say I was in the 6th or 7th grade, so it would have been 2006 or 7. And they moved here to be close to family. And we stayed in touch. We came out and visited them a couple times. We actually almost moved here because we really liked it. My dad just couldn't find the right job, and so it didn't work out. But it always was in the back of my mind. I just had this feeling the first time I came to Utah of it was almost as if a voice told me this is a place for you. You need to be here. And I didn't really think much of it at the time because I was in middle school and certainly was not connected to God, divine, spirit at that time in my life. A lot of my life I actually felt very separate from a higher power because I didn't go to church. I wasn't raised in any formal organized religion. I went through the Boy Scouts, and there was minimal talk of God, but it was when you're about to rank up and go to the next badge, you'd have a board of review and people would sit you down and they'd say, how are you doing your duty to God and your country? And I'd always felt so uncomfortable with the duty to God part because I'm I don't know. I don't go to church. I don't pray. Like, yeah, I don't know. I always just felt like, I answered it pretty much the same always, where I'm like, I try to be the best human being I can be for all humans. And yeah, I think I had it figured out a long time ago, before all the limiting beliefs got in the way. But really, I think looking back, my spirituality really shone when I was in the mountains. My dad was really into hiking, and that's what we did a lot. Most weekends, almost year round, we do trips in the snow. We do long backpacking trips every summer. Once I got a little bit older, we'd do some extreme hikes. Forgive the jets. Forgive the jets. Once I got a little older, we got into like some extreme hiking. We called it X hikes, and essentially we'd do like an ultra marathon in a day. Pick a route that we normally would backpack and try and do it in 12 hours. And I think our biggest day was like 36 miles or something. And so that paired with being in sports my whole life, I definitely like knew how to push my body. And I would have said, I'm connected to my body. Look at all the things I can make it do. And really, it was a way for me to connect with my dad, and it was a way that I felt seen, because I was always a bigger kid. I'm about 6'4", and so getting into Boy Scouts, I wanted to hang out with the older boys, and I wanted to keep up with them on the hikes, and so I pushed myself to like be seen, and that kind of carried on. That mixed with, definitely some people pleasing. I feel like I learned at a very young age that anger, frustration was just there wasn't room for it. My mom was raising me and my brother and doing daycare, and I was often told, be the bigger boy, be more mature. So my child brain was like, oh, it's more mature to suppress these feelings than to express them. When really it was, my mom was stressed. She was tired. She didn't have the energy to sort out every little dispute, which between two brothers and daycare kids, there's many. But that carried on into my future. So coming out to Utah, I really only went to college because my parents told me it was a good idea. Go get a degree and get a job. Get a business degree if you don't know what you want to do, because that's safe and you'll always find work. And I tried. My first year was black and white, or white and black. Had a very successful first semester. Despite the trials, I went through a breakup with my high school sweetheart. We tried long distance, and it just kind of fizzled out once she went to college. And my friend and I, we were best buds growing up, but we'd kind of drifted apart. My friend group kind of got into, ooh, let's try drinking, ooh, let's try weed, ooh, let's smoke cigarettes, and I just kind of went along with it. And then it really started serving a purpose for me, helping me escape the anxiety, the depression I felt, how out of place I felt in the world. And meanwhile, my friend had been living in Utah since 2006 or 2007, and very different culture here. Primarily LDS, especially where he moved to. So he wasn't really dabbling in anything like that. So we were just kind of different. I wanted to go out and be around people. I was an extrovert. Really, I was just trying to cope with the loneliness I felt inside. So I didn't like being alone. And he was very much happy to chill at home, sleep until noon on Saturday, get up, play video games, play his guitar. He was just good at being alone, I felt. And maybe that was a protection mechanism as well, but mine was the opposite. I wanted to be out around people, doing things, distracting myself from my inner world. And so we kind of drifted apart, and that made my second semester a lot harder. After going back home for the Christmas break and reconnecting with all my homies again. Definitely fell back into patterns of like smoking tons of cigarettes, smoking weed all the time. Still wasn't big on drinking, but I would a little bit here and there. And then to like have that deep connection. Most of these friends I'd known since T-ball, first grade, second grade, and we all stayed together all through high school and beyond. So it was really hard for me to come back here and have that oscillation back and forth, feeling connection and acceptance, and then coming back to isolation. And it really did a number on my system. So my second semester, I was searching for any sort of community and fell into the fraternity system at Weber State, which they aren't nationally recognized. They don't allow national fraternities on campus due to some hazing incidents back in the 90s or something. So it's just a club. So I actually ended up forming a club fraternity, and we set out to be a brotherhood in chivalry, loyalty, and physical strength. And I thought, wow, I'll just create the community I want. Unfortunately, that just didn't work out. Like the scene there was just a lot of people pretending, a lot of people coping, a lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol, a lot of just inappropriate behavior. And ultimately, the founding president and myself, we were living together at the time. We just had a falling out because he was trying to take things too far with pledges, and I was standing up for them, and he also couldn't afford rent. So we had to get evicted from our apartment, and luckily one of the pledges and I really connected, and he let me come live with him and his girlfriend, and that really saved me. This next chapter of my life, started to begin, leaving the fraternity system, kind of putting some of the running away from myself to the side. And it really shifted when my roommate started taking me to the gym. He was big into powerlifting, and he took me to the gym one day and started teaching me how to strength train. And I was like, oh, this feels good. It feels good to move my body, to push my body in this way. We were getting up early. We were, trying to eat good food, and it was very supportive to me at first. And then from there at the gym, we ran into a gentleman who was doing a snatch. It's an exercise where you pick a barbell up from the ground and throw it up over your head, catch it in a squat. And he walked up to him and goes, "How'd you learn to do this?" And he's like, "Oh, I compete in Olympic weightlifting with the team out of Salt Lake, but I'm starting a club team here at Weber. Our first practice is tomorrow at 5 a.m. And we both were like, 5 a.m.? Okay, we'll do it. And we went, and it was a light bulb moment for me. I just loved the technicality of it. Yes, there was, physical strength involved and, moving heavy weight, but if you didn't get it just right, you weren't going to hold it. And I loved that. Coming from mostly team sports, I loved the individual drive that was required for you to focus and complete a lift. And so I dove right into that, and it became my obsession. It became an outlet for the frustration, the frustration and anger that I've been suppressing my whole life. And my anxiety, my depression, it just became something for me to focus my energy on. And I had a wonderful team of people around me. We were all motivated. Everyone was doing well in school. No one was going out and getting drunk on the weeknights because we had to wake up and weightlift. And because we got drug tested at meets, or potentially could be, it was a good, kind of keep me on the straight and narrow, so to speak. And I just loved it. I got really big. I don't know how big I got. At my biggest, I was probably like 250 pounds at 6'4", probably 15% body fat. I was just kind of a monster. But I had a lot of injuries. We were always training hard. The motto was no pain, no gain, push through, which kind of was the motto for my whole life. Keep holding more, keep shoving it down. Don't express how you really feel. Just keep going, and it'll work out. And so that led to a broken wrist, led to many overuse injuries, chronic back pain, and that started me on my healing journey with the physical body. I went and had my first massage at recommendation by my coach, and I was kind of blown away because I always thought massage was more of a luxury, like, oh, go treat yourself at the spa, and, you know, candles, dim lights, spa music, and hot oil or something. And instead, I went into a clinic that had the radio playing, and, you know, lights were on, and you know, I just had like compression shorts on, and they were just moving me all around, doing this and that, elbows in here, there, and it was painful at times, tickled at times, like I was squirming all over the place. But afterwards, I felt kind of reborn, and I was like, whoa, I had no idea this was possible. So I started going back for a few massages here and there, and really just started chatting up the lead therapist there, and just wanted to know. I'm like, so you support your family with this? He's like, oh yeah. And I was like, amazing. And I was like, how long is school? And he's like, oh, you know, if you do go full time, it's like maybe 9-10 months. And I was like, huh. And I was like, where would you recommend to check it out? And he gave me a couple names of schools, and I drove down later that week and toured Myotherapy College of Massage. Rest in peace. And I'll never forget the current president of the school, a man named Roger. Just this boisterous, super excited, like, brain. I don't know how else to put it. He just lit up when I showed interest in knowing all about the school and like what there was to learn and what he did. And I mean, this man could tell you anything about any muscle in the body, even down to what nerve innervates it, where it comes out of the spine, what blood vessel goes to it, where that originates in the body. And I mean, he just knew the body like a computer. And I was so fascinated with that I was sold instantly. I think we talked for maybe an hour, and he walked me around the school, introduced me to some people, and I was like, great, where do I sign up? So I ended up calling my parents and saying, hey, I really want to do massage school. I want to take a year off of Weber State. I was on a scholarship that gave me kind of a break on out-of-state tuition, but not allowing me to get residency. So it just kind of made sense to me, where I'm like, okay, this feels more aligned with where I'm heading. I still don't know what I want to do for a major, so maybe a year will be good, and I can get residency while I do so. So dove right into that. Meanwhile, I had started working at the school gym at Weber State, and I had applied to become a functional fitness consultant for the campus rec team, which essentially meant I just kind of monitored the gym space, made sure people weren't hurting themselves or others, and I'd clean machines, you know, opening and closing the gym depending on what shift you had. And my boss, how do we describe him? I guess I'll describe him how he described himself. He called himself like an undercover urban shaman. He was very much doing like coaching, emotional release work, definitely used psychedelics in a ceremonial way to unlock parts of himself, and helped guide other people that were ready. And my interview for this job was like 2 hours long, and this man was asking me questions like, what do you think your soul's purpose is here on this earth? You know, what is Sam's biggest, wildest dream? What are you too scared to dream? You know, and he was like asking me all these things, and there were moments where we were in deep laughter. There were moments where I was in tears, and the whole time I was just enamored. I was like, wow, this man is like, he sees right into me, and he knows exactly what to ask to bring things to the surface. And that was really fascinating to me. So I loved working with him. I met one of my best friends working at the gym, and he also came to massage school with me. And he and I and our boss would sometimes go, for a nice hike in the mountains, take some mushrooms together, and just talk about life. We had like a weekly meditation on Sundays. We would, go have dinner at his house and, just talk about nature, connection to the earth, why we're all here, and just kind of philosophize and, listening to Alan Watts or just whomever. And he really like opened that door to a spiritual way of living for me. And I was super into it. And a lot of people that I was around kind of poo-pooed it, and they saw him as kind of a weirdo. And once he moved away, he took a job in another state and left Utah. That pendulum kind of swung back. I lived in a house full of my weightlifting friends, and we were all in hard science degrees at that time. I had, finished massage school, went into exercise and sports science and nutrition education, and a lot of the energy work experiences I was having, like, it didn't feel comfortable sharing it with them because they all kind of had their preconceived notions about it being bullshit. And so I kind of just like tucked that part of me away, put it to the side, and just kind of, stayed in the role that I felt would keep me accepted, keep me as part of the group. Another pattern of mine that I worked really hard over the years to let go of. So, I kind of went back to some old ways. Here and there, I'd, start smoking cigarettes again or smoking weed for a period. And just kind of, moseying through life, doing what I needed to do to survive. I worked here and there doing massage while I was going through school. And then upon graduation, I had an internship doing personal training, some light nutrition coaching, and, was still doing massage. And I just really felt lost. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I actually don't like personal training. I don't like nutrition counseling. People's emotions and, subconscious patterns were just obviously in the way of them committing to themselves. And they just wanted me to be like the mean parent and tell them no or force them to work out. And I just didn't want to do that. And I felt like it was a waste of both of our time. So I stepped away from that and walked right into a pretty rough relationship for me. I have nothing but love for this person now, but at the time it was some hard lessons. I firmly believe like everyone comes into your life for a reason. Everyone's a mirror, and there were invitations for me to grow and set boundaries and stand up for myself. But this relationship really like highlighted how unsafe that felt for me. And she was verbally abusive, emotionally abusive, most likely cheating on me. Kind of had these almost like bipolar, manic depressive swings. Where it would be like one day everything would be fine, and then 3 a.m. she'd wake me up and start telling me like, I hate you. You don't love me. You don't treat me like a queen. Like, why are you even here? Blah, 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 and just like starting an argument, and I'd be like confused and be like, what's going on? What did I do? What did I say? Like, what? I'd go into that like over anxious attachment, like, oh, let me fix this. What's going on? What's going on? And I could tell she fed off of that. Like she was just showing up as this angry, hurt little girl that just needed someone to hold her, but really she needed herself to hold her. She almost like expected me to show up as her dad. And the longer we dated, the more isolated I got from my friends. I lived in a house that her dad bought her with her. I had sold most of my things when I moved in, and I was kind of stuck and didn't know what to do. And the more time went on, the more I got to see like her parents and their relationship, and started to realize like, whoa, like I see where these patterns are coming from. Not great communication skills. Apparently they used to fight very physically and like, have these huge eruptive explosions, and then one of them would just like disappear for a few days and then come back and act like nothing ever happened. And that's kind of how she was expecting me to act with her. but it made me feel insane. That was when I first learned about what gaslighting means. And I was like, whoa, okay, I'm not insane, but this is insane. And ultimately, I chose myself. After things started to get like a little more escalated, she, was throwing things at me, and I was like, okay, I gotta get out of here, or I'm gonna physically harm this person. And I remember I flew home to my parents for a weekend and just stayed with them and tried talking things over with them. And I had told her that I was done, and she went like full pendulum swing into the other direction, like, oh, like I'm gonna go to therapy, I know I need help, I'm sorry for the way I've treated you, da 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 da, come back in. And my silly self kind of fell for it. But still, I was like firm in like, I'm not gonna live there anymore. So I flew back. It was the day I flew home, or flew back to Utah, was the day of one of my best friend's bachelor parties. And I got from the airport, immediately drove to the house where I was living with her, called on my old friend, the former pledge and powerlifter friend, and I said, hey, do you have a truck still? And he said yes. And I was like, I need help. Please meet me at this address. I have to move out of here. And he showed up for me once again, and he helped me pack up all my things. She showed up in the middle of all this, called her parents. They were all being absolute children, just like really pissing me off, like making all these snide comments, just being absolutely rude. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I gotta get out of here. So I just grabbed what was essential and left so much stuff, and was just like, screw it, I'm done. Went and got a storage unit and put everything in there. And last thing my friend said to me was like, good for you, man. She was totally crazy. And that was good. It was just validating to know that like what I was enduring was not normal, not a healthy relationship. Work in a relationship does not mean sacrificing yourself and letting someone use you as a punching bag when they feel overwhelmed or when their trauma is triggered. It was one-sided work. I was expected to accommodate her childish behavior and toddler tantrums and outbursts and all this rage. And if I stood up for myself, it was, double down on the rage and, shut down. So after that, I was pretty broken. I'll be honest. I was pretty disillusioned with love and relationships, and I had been in like a handful of relationships prior to that just all kind of, I found myself with more mirrors of like anxious attachment and codependency and jealousy and all these patterns that I'm like, okay, this is not what I need. Like, what do I need to do to find the right person? And so I promised myself, and I even told some of my buddies, I'm like, I'm gonna take a full year with no dating to really figure this out and like give myself some space and time, because I was a serial relationship haver. I'd jump out from one and right into another, never taking time to like digest what I'd just been through, what to learn, etc. And so I went through a dark night of the soul. I was very isolated. I was in a considerable amount of debt at the time, and didn't have any things. I ended up moving in with one of my best friends in his basement. I was sleeping on his childhood mattress. I didn't have a dresser. I didn't have a bed frame. I just had clothes and I think a record collection and my cat. I had my cat, Loki. So I just went through a dark period. I was, pretty close to the edge, thinking about suicide a lot, really not wanting to be here, just wanting to feel loved and accepted. But I knew I couldn't seek that from someone else without finding it within myself. And shortly before COVID happened, I did have one night where I was really struggling, and I was like, okay, I gotta get out of the house. I gotta be around people, or I might do something stupid. And I made myself go to a bar, even though I don't love going to bars. And I went and asked for a club soda and lime in a copper cup, so it looked like I was drinking a drink. Um, I remember just like standing around the bar, looking like a goof, and a gentleman walked up to me and he says, "Hey," he's like, "my girlfriend's friend thinks you're cute. Are you single?" And I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "Cool, do you want to come hang out with us?" And I said, "Sure." So I come over and sit at their table, and we all introduce ourselves and get to talking, and we just had such a lovely conversation, talking about life, talking about philosophy, talking about spirituality, talking about psychedelics, talking about just all these more expanded ways of looking at life. And I hadn't been around that for years, and it really like brought that pendulum back again, where it was like, hey, that door is opening again, do you want to go in? And we hung out a few more times, and eventually he invited me to a dinner party. It was probably a few months later. COVID had started, the shutdowns were happening, and he was like, he's like, "I don't buy it." He's like, let's still have a dinner party and like, be in connection, because that's important. So I came over to his house for dinner, and he was expecting some guests that he had been renting an Airbnb from before he officially moved here. And they showed up, walked in the door right as we were talking about mushrooms, and he thought they were Mormon, but turns out they weren't. And they were like, "You guys talk about mushrooms?" And we're like, "Yeah, we're talking about mushrooms." And they're like, "Oh, cool. Have you guys ever done ayahuasca?" And we're like, "No, but we were like talking about that earlier, and thinking about where in the world we would want to go to do it." And they just go, "Oh, we got a lady here in Utah that serves." And we're like, "Oh, really?" So one thing led to another. She connected me with this woman. I went to go sit in my first ceremony, and the rest was history. It was, again, light bulb moment. Like, this is a space for me. This is something I want to learn. And it was actually communicated by the facilitator at one point. She interviewed me before I was allowed to come. And she wanted to get a feel for who I was and what I was going to be working through. And in the middle of me explaining myself and who I am and what I'm coming to work on, she just goes, "I gotta pause you." She's like, "My spirit guides are coming in very strong right now, and you have to know that you have the shamanic gift. For lack of a better term, you have, like, you've walked the medicine man path before in a previous life or lives, and this is something that feels like your soul is calling for your own healing, and if you choose, maybe someday you'll facilitate for others." And I thought, interesting. I'm like, well, let's see how this ceremony goes, and then go from there. Came down to ceremony time. We had incredible experiences with breath work. We didn't end up having ayahuasca at the first ceremony because her shipment got stopped at the border of Peru or something, and we ended up working with mushrooms instead. And she had a beautiful experience. I was seeing all this baggage that I'd been holding for my whole life, things that I was trying to hold for my mom or my dad or my brother, or just all these people in my life, all these cords going to other people where I was, feeling dysregulated by their dysregulation and trying to feel their things in order for me to feel safe. And I was really just blown away. I was like, whoa, I got a lot of work to do. And my main intention of that ceremony was, I want to see the things inside of me that are attracting partners like the one I had just had. And it was all laid out on the table. So after that, I started sitting fairly regularly. I was assisting in her ceremonies. I eventually did a mentorship with her, an apprenticeship really, for about a year, learning how to serve. And from there, got connected with some other journey groups, was the medicine man for a group in Denver for a few years. Met a facilitator at that group who actually lived in Utah, and then she and I connected, did a lot of sessions together, and eventually did a mentorship with her. And yeah, through all of that, I had wild initiations. going back into sexual trauma I had as a kid, going back to sexual trauma that happened when I was in the fraternity, becoming a parent. Well, back it up. Meeting my now wife and falling in love, like deeply in love with someone who I knew was there to hold me to my highest good. And someone that I felt safe enough to like completely fall apart and dissolve the parts that don't matter and find the parts that do and really come into my own. And through that came a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort, a lot of, patterns coming up, limiting beliefs, all sorts of stuff that I just was not able to work through on my own because I wasn't being with myself. But with her, she just held up a mirror and was like, here's this, here's this, here's this. And we helped each other heal through so many things so beautifully. And then we got pregnant, accidentally. Accidentally, on purpose. I know our souls planned this, and it was perfect for what it was. We found out we were pregnant the week we moved into our first home that we bought, and it brought up a lot for both of us. I probably had a 5-minute panic where I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna be like 48 years old when this kid graduates high school, like, oh, like there it goes, there's my life, it's not about me anymore. And then I thought, well, I've always wanted to be a father though, so let's see. Let's make the best of it. I'm gonna be the best father I can be. And this is probably good. At the time, I was really like circling the drain with like really really wanting to be fully self-employed, but way too many subconscious blocks around being seen, putting in effort, doing the work to market myself. All of that was like such a mystery to me, and I felt like if I didn't know the right way to do it, I would just not do it at all, and was just expecting people to find me because I was good at what I did, but it's not how it works. And so getting pregnant was really like the ultimate motivator. Like, okay, the selfish self needs to die. It's not any longer about you alone. It's about you and your family, and you stepping into this provider role and showing up. And it brought up different things for my wife. For her, it was very much around feeling out of control in her body, which was a pattern from her past. Because truly, like there's a baby growing in there, and you're not in control of it. So it brought up a lot for both of us and set us on a expedited path of growth. My son was born on the winter solstice, 2023, and it was beautiful. We had a home birth. It was very empowering. Just immediately fell in love with this boy. And but the panic was real. The stress was real. I felt the weight of 1,000 worlds on my shoulders, and was still coping with like extreme anxiety and bouts of depression, and about 2 months into fatherhood, my childhood best friend, my absolute best friend who I met in T-ball, took his life. And that absolutely just obliterated me, just smashed my heart into a million pieces. Really sent me into some dark places, and I remember having thoughts like, God, he's lucky. I can't handle this life. I wish that was me. And that scared me. I really did not feel okay with how I was feeling. I started having a lot of panic attacks. I started really running to cannabis to dissociate enough to not have to sit in the feelings that I was having, but still be able to show up for work and do things, provide for my family. And it became this crazy pattern where I was just smoking to escape, but then feeling shame about escaping because I knew that there were things underneath all of this that I could work on, but I didn't know what it was exactly or how to work on it. So the cycle just ran for many months. And then when I did this mentorship with the facilitator that I had met in Denver. There was one day I'm just sitting on her couch, and I was listening to someone share a deep story about sexual trauma at age 3. And as they were sharing it, I felt my whole body get cold. And I started dissociating, and I was like, oh, I'm dissociating right now. What's going on? And my brain was trying to analyze it, and then just intuition came through, and it's like, dissociating means only one thing: you have a similar trauma. And I was like, oh boy. So I started muscle testing and came to the conclusion that yes, it was true. I'd done enough work to get into my body and trust the information my body gives me, that I knew what was true and what was story. And I got definitive yes, you had sexual trauma that you don't remember. And if anyone's familiar with The Body Keeps the Score, it's true. And I remember thinking, oh, what do I do with this? I had sexual trauma at age 4 that I remembered. I was repeatedly molested by the neighbor's daughter, who was probably 8 or 9, and I was 4. And, I always felt that wasn't traumatic because it wasn't violent or aggressive, but had a big healing moment when I went in, talked to my inner child, and realized it was traumatic. And so I immediately started asking, was it more trauma with the neighbor? Nope. And I thought, oh great. I'm like, was it with a stranger? No. Was it family? Yes. And I thought, sheesh. Checking mom's side, dad's side. Got the confirmation of who it was, and my heart instantly knew. When I knew it was family, before I checked mom or dad's side, I knew exactly who it was. Picture of their face just came right into my mind, and that sent me into my darkest pit. I thought it had gotten dark after my friend killed himself, but this was the ultimate darkness, the darkest night of the soul I'd been through. And I truly did not want to be here anymore. I did not want to live. I did not know how to cope with the feelings. I went up to my mentor after figuring this all out, and I just talked to her and I said, hey, I'm like, how do we work with repressed memory sexual trauma? I'm like, I'm pretty sure I have some. And she's like, yeah. She's like, oh, we can work on that, The trick is just going into the body and finding where it's held and helping the body feel safe to release it. You can't, necessarily get the memories back, though in her experience, she had a ton of repressed memory sexual trauma that started to come back in dreams, and as she did more work, she still has things come back into her consciousness from time to time. So I said, great, when do we do that? And she's like, well, I'm going on a hiatus to take care of myself for probably the next year. And I thought, well, shit, that's inconvenient, but okay, I respect it. When you come back to work, I'll be ready. And I went through 8 grueling months of just begging for a bullet, running so hard with cannabis, literally waking up with such panic that my body was convinced if I didn't smoke and get high that I was going to die. And I did not know how to handle these feelings and the anger that came up, and I was stuck in the loop of well, if I don't remember it, it can't be real. So how do I get the memories back? And is it real? Is it not real? Am I even real? And was just going crazy. Then it transformed into how could someone do this to a child? Who does this to a 3-year-old? 3, 5, 7, 10. Those were the ages it happened. And I was like, how does this happen? And I would get so angry, but I was so uncomfortable with feeling anger that I just would go insane. And finally, I just got to this point where I was literally every day typing out a message to my former mentor, when are you coming back to work? I am not okay. I need help. And I'd look at it and I'd be like, I can't send that. I can't send that. And then one day it finally clicked. I'm like, I'm stuck in the victim. And she doesn't go into the drama triangle. She's not gonna be the hero that saves me. I have to be in a different space for her to step in and guide me. She won't save me, she'll only guide. And so I made the conscious choice. I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna die. I'm not gonna kill myself. I will make it through this. The timing will be right. I release the victim consciousness about this. Like, I am fully open to when it's time is time. And she texted me the next morning. And we set a date for Easter Monday. Perfect day for a rebirth. And I had my first one-on-one psychedelic therapy session. And it was out of this world. I'll dive into it another time, but it saved my life. Totally saved my life. And we did a few sessions after that to kind of clean up loose ends and this and that. And over the last 2 years now, I've just been piecing more things together. I've had bits of memory come back, but ultimately I've gotten to a place of trust and just compassion for myself. And that was the hardest thing to find. One of my good friends always reminds me of a Richard Rudd quote, the guy who channeled Gene Keys, that people don't need help, they need love. And so that's my mission here on earth, is to love. That's what I try to transmit through my work, and that's what I hope you feel and find through this podcast as I interview healers and bring up ideas and modalities and things that could help shape your future, could help change your life, could help you heal parts of you that you've shut down a long time ago. And again, everything I share, I share because I wish I had more access to this earlier in my life. I understand divine timing, and I can't help but, think about that some days. Wow, what if the world was like this? What if people were talking openly about their experiences, about their trauma? What if people were openly expressing and transmuting their anger and frustration and guilt and shame? Maybe we wouldn't be where we are as a society right now. And maybe this is the step forward that we need. So again, anything that I present on this podcast it's just a road. It's a potential path to consider looking down and saying, no, do I want to drive there? Nah, not for me. Or maybe that one is for me, or whatever. Nothing is law, nothing is set in stone. Excuse the jets. And I'm not trying to sell anyone on anything. I'm merely just trying to shed light on the things that have been impactful for me, and maybe they'll be impactful for you, or maybe just a perspective shift or a new way of thinking and looking at something. I don't know. But yeah, thank you for being here. That's all I have for now. If you like this, please feel free to comment. Reach out to me any way you feel called to. And I'd love to hear any feedback or any ideas for things I could talk about in the future. I do have kind of an idea of people I want to interview and things I want to talk about and discuss, but I'm really open to exploring anything. So don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you again for listening.